Okay, let's start the recap. As you all know, Ding won the fourth game to tie the matchup. The game was very interesting, and at some point, it seems like Yam made some bad choices. Yay, 10 gifted subs from Thaddeus. And then another gifted sub after, maybe. I'm not sure. I think just 10. Yay, Thaddeus gave 5 subs. Now we're at level 10. Thaddeus wanted to put us at level 10, and he did. Well, the stream is over. That's as much time as we have, and we basically just went through the hype train. Bye, everybody. This is my favorite recap stream so far. But seriously, the last 2 recaps I did, games 2 and 3, I got 1 sub for each. And no bits and no donations. So this one's better. You guys must like when Ding wins. I don't know. Yay, it's a lot of noises. Thanks, everybody, for all the hype. Thanks, Thaddeus and Drip Dried and so forth. Well, definitely Karen is a Ding fan. Okay, so let's have a look at the game. Ding played the English, C4. Black has many responses, and in many cases, he can transpose into queen pawn openings, which we saw a lot in the Karpov-Korchnoi matches in the 70s, when Karpov would play e6 and transpose to a QGD. Okay, he played knight f6 and then e5. So there's a regular 4 knights English. And here, white has 3 common moves, e3, g3, and e4. And occasionally, they play moves like d3 or a3. Okay, he played e3. And now black can play bishop e7 or bishop b4. And it could even play d5 and play an open Sicilian and reverse a tempo down. But played bishop b4, which is the most common. Queen c2. And when I was a kid, black would castle here, and white would play knight d5, and black would play bishop e7. But I'm not a kid anymore. So he played bishop takes c3, forcing white to make a decision. It seems to me, and again, I'm not up on theory on this. I don't play either side of this. It seems to me the move that makes the most sense is to take with the queen. Otherwise, queen c2 is probably not necessary. But he didn't. He took with the b pawn. And I have positions similar to this when I have black in a bishop b5 Sicilian, except white's a tempo up because he's white. And I don't play queen here and knight here, but I have the same pawn structure. Okay, and black wants to keep the center closed because black has more knights than white. And black wants to put all his center pawns on black squares, so his black squared bishop isn't blocked because he doesn't have one, and his white squared bishop has a lot of squares. Okay, e4. This is what I play with black. So I could have black in a similar position up down a tempo, and I like to play knight e7, knight g6 when I'm black. Otherwise, I would have a similar kind of position. Now, white's going to get an advantage of 2 bishops, and he's going to have a nice big center. Black's going to have the advantage of these doubled and isolated pawns, and maybe he can attack them, and maybe he can win them. And in fact, all that stuff happened. So that's what's going on. Okay, castles. Bishop e2. And he played knight h5, wants to play knight f4, and or f5. Either one's good. Knight f4 is good, f5 is good, it's all good. Okay, so knight h5 is reasonable. Now, in this position, if you play for tricks, you quickly realize tricks are for kids. For example, I could play knight takes e5. That's a trick because it attacks the knight on h5. But that actually isn't good because I take, and if you take on h5 with the bishop, queen g5 attacks your bishop and attacks g2. And the engine says white resigns. Man, tough engine. Man, engines are tough. It already says black is up +6. That's pretty crazy. So those tricks don't always work. Let me refresh. Didn't do a good job refreshing. Okay, knight h5, d4 was played. Now if you play knight f4, I can capture it. And I have my big center. So white got the center, white got the two bishops. Black has moves such as knight f4, queen f6, f5 that he has to consider. He played knight f4, not the engine's favorite move, but okay, he played knight h5. So in this position, the engine prefers queen f6. Because after knight f4, it doesn't want to take with the pawn. It wants to keep this pawn in the center. Okay, so black got rid of white's two bishops, but white has this beautiful center. And again, doubled pawns, isolated pawn. As somebody who plays the queen c2 Nimzo Indian with white, I would be very happy with white here. This is like what I'm going for. I want to play e4. I don't really care if my pawns are doubled because I have this big center. And black has double pawns also. Okay, so the engine slightly prefers the white pieces here. Castles, queen f6. Instead of queen f6 first, he plays it next. Rook e1, rook e8, bishop d3. Looks nice. Now, the difficulty in playing white is if white never moves any of his pawns, what do you want him to do? Like that's like the only plan is to get your center going. We can't get our king side going. Does it make any sense? Black could. And we can't put pieces on better squares. There's no better squares. Like that's it. Knight here. I mean, I can't. But what I can do is push my pawns and crush you, as was played in the game. However, that's not easy to do. Black has dominance over the e5 square. I got everything on d5, on e5. I almost called it the right thing. And black is pretty solid. What am I supposed to attack in black's position? So the engine thinks this is about equal because it doesn't see how white progresses his center advantage. Okay, bishop g4, reasonable move. Knight to d2. Knight a5. The engines aren't big fans of knight a5, but often in this kind of Nimzo Indian structure, black wants to attack the c4 pawn, usually with b6, bishop a6. And also, black may want to play c5 and stop white's center from moving ever. d5 would be anti-positional, giving away this square, and the pawns can't move. So Ding knew that. He knew that black was going to play c5 eventually, so he played c5. And sacrificing this doubled pawn is quite common to push in the center because the d6 pawn was stopping white from playing e5. And now if we take and we're a pawn ahead, now white's pawn center is mobile. So c5 is very reasonable. It's a pawn sack, so it's risky because a lot of top players don't want to be down a pawn. Okay, so he took the pawn. We don't really want to play DC because our pawn structure is frankly ridiculous. We want this pawn structure. Okay, so he played e5 with 2 threats. He's threatening the queen, which you see, and he's threatening h7, which about 33% of you see. So he plays queen h6, which stops both. And white plays d5. So you could say, wow, I like white now. Black was okay, but what's black doing? What black's doing is being up a pawn. So black's up a pawn. White has a very nice center, but it's not easy to proceed. Unless you have a barber, then you can say, Baba, proceed. And you can't play d6 and you can't play e6 because your center crumbles. And if you never play d6 or e6, what's your plan? That turns out white won the game, as you know, and he played d6 and e6. So there you go. Okay, so that's white's plan, is to continue. Black played rook d8, attacking the pawn on d5. c4, explosive, b6. b6 solidifies the pawn structure, defends the knight, and allows the knight to come back. Now, this knight's actually not so bad on a5 because he's putting pressure here on the c-pawn, which actually matters later when white's trying to move his pieces to better squares. Now, if you want to teach chess to beginners, which is about all you can do, then you can easily tell them white has the big center, black played knight h5 and knight a5, and white won. And then your kids will believe you, and what you said makes sense, and there you go. So if you're teaching chess to beginners, you can say, this guy who's playing for the world championship, he put his knights on the side of the board and let his opponent get a big center, so that's why white won. And you wouldn't be 100% wrong, but okay. So h3, put it in h, bishop h5, bishop e4, and if you play rook takes e5, I'll play bishop takes h7 check, and your rook is hanging on e5 by discovered attack. So this pawn's indirectly defended, you can't take it. Okay, he decided to double up on the bubble up, put pressure on the e5 pawn. Okay, now in this position, assuming white doesn't lose his e-pawn and just defends it somehow, and assuming black doesn't do anything and just chills, how's white going to win? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know what white does to make his position better, because I like everything in his position. And I like black's defense. e6 is protected a million times. d6 is protected twice. It can be protected 3 times. This pawn's attacked, and black's up a pawn, and black has a plan eventually to push his kingside pawns, if possible. Thanks, Nitro 1111. So even though the engine likes white and humans like white because it looks nice, it's not easy to break through. Now, one of Jan's faults, weaknesses, is that's not what he likes to do. He doesn't like to sit back and wait and hope his opponent doesn't beat him. That's not the way Jan plays chess. Jan plays actively. Jan plays for advantage. Jan plays for tricks. He doesn't say, I can defend this position and then I'll be fine. I'll just chill. Jan doesn't do that. Thanks, Cage Bruno, for 300 bits. So to me, to be perfectly honest, this seems like a position where Jan should be white against Ding. White sacked a pawn. White has a big center. Black has solid defense and can wait. And this seems like this should be Jan versus Ding, not Ding versus Jan. That's what it seems like to me. that their strengths would go to the opposite position. Okay, he played bishop f3, which defends his rook. Now, during the live commentary, which I watched a little of with David Howell, Naroditsky, and Geary kept suggesting bishop g6. Because if the knight goes to e4, he wanted to chop that knight off. He wasn't worried about the white bishop wreaking havoc. He was worried about the white knight wreaking havoc, which was very prophetic. And I'll let you guys look up prophetic while I have some tea. What, you couldn't spell it? Okay. All right. So instead, Jan played knight b7. And that move's okay. It's not terrible. Rook e2. He's going to play the same double up on the bubble up. And he played f6. So I already told you the result of the game, but now you really know the result of the game. And f6 is a fine move here if you're not ready to sit back and just play passive. And f6 actually works in concert with knight b7. Because if white plays e6, which he wants to play, now we have the d6 square for the knight. Now, some of you have been holding your tongue, or I haven't been reading the chat, and some of you are like, doesn't d6 attack the rook and the knight? And if white had ever done that, when black takes on d6, the rook defends the knight. See, grandmasters are lucky here. They calculated that. Okay, so e6 and knight d6. Now again, I like white. White's got the nice pawn chain in the center. Black is very passive. Black's rooks are super passive. Okay, but I don't know what white does. I have no plan for white. I just like white a lot. But I don't see what white does. Black's just blocking everything, and black's up a pawn, and black's pawns are all defended, and the white pawns are completely stopped. White's white squared bishop is blocked by his own pawns. And if white does nothing for an extended period of time, and black gets frisky, black can play g5 and, g4 and rook g7. And if black doesn't want to do that because that's risky, he doesn't want to be frisky because it's risky, he can just chill. Now, unfortunately, for Jan fans, Jan didn't do any of that. Jan didn't chill, and Jan didn't attack on the king side. He did something which just lost. And unfortunately, and this happens to Jan, he did it quickly. He was playing fast. I was watching. He wasn't thinking a long time on his moves. When Karpov played Kasparov and Karpov played Korchnoi in the 70s and 80s, they never moved. It was like 40 moves in 2.5 hours, and they were in time trouble on move 20. They never moved. They thought forever on every move. And Jan's like moving in 20 seconds, 10 seconds, and his moves are bad. Now, up until here, this has been a very well-played game, very interesting. White sacked a pawn, white got a big center, black got a good blockade, and this looks like, to me, a game that should end in a draw, because I don't see how either side wins. But Jan was probably super excited for his great start. He's playing better than Ding. Ding claims he has psychological issues, and he's a pawn up, and so forth. So he's like, I don't care if I'm white or black. I'm going to play for a win. I'm not just going to sit here and wait. Okay, so he doubled the rooks, and now Jan played a series of bad moves which led to a lost position. Basically, he can do nothing. If the engine was playing another engine, they would repeat here. Bishop e4, bishop e4, bishop e4, bishop e4, bishop g6, bishop e4, bishop h5, bishop f3. That's actually the engine line. Because after bishop g6, what do you want white to do? Well, white can't do anything. He wants to trade off all the minor pieces because then these rooks are terrible and d6 isn't blocked. And black wants to keep his knight here. So after bishop e4, doesn't want to take with a knight, doesn't want to take with the bishop because then my knight's going to attack your knight. So he just goes back to h5. And the white bishop on e4 isn't very threatening. Okay. I didn't mean to make that move. Now the board's all ugly. Okay. So he played knight f5 ostensibly to play knight d4. And that's really playing for a win. Knight d6 is saying, can't touch this. Maybe he's not an MC Hammer fan. Maybe Ding is. Ding's listening to that 80s music, right? And instead of putting the knight on d6, the perfect blockade, he wants the knight on d4 and then maybe pushes kingside pawns and play for a win. And that's not stupid. It's just that he did it so quickly, he totally misevaluated the situation. Okay, bishop takes h5 and rook e4 attacking the pawn on f4 and stopping knight d4 from happening, or so we thought. Thanks, Savvy Drone. Now here, if I play knight d4, I could play the exchange sack, and if I take on f4, knight e2 wins the exchange. So actually, if you are going to play knight d4, which you shouldn't do, then you should play it here. But don't do it. But he played queen h6 defending his pawn, and then queen f3 attacking the pawn. And this is going to be a really nice endgame for white, because white's going to get his pawn back. He's still going to have the center, and these rooks can't move. And here black has to play g5, and probably white's better because that's a little shaky. But he has to do it. And instead he played knight d4, which was his plan, and Ding just immediately took it. He didn't think at all about it. And the reason is, and obviously when I say always sack the exchange, you rarely get the opportunity to have such a strong minor piece and such bad rooks. Theoretically, a rook's better than a knight, but no rook is better than that knight, and no knight is worse than those rooks. Those rooks are terrible. Those rooks got nothing going on. There's no open files. They're blocked. They can't move. Okay, and white's got knight d4, knight c6, knight f5, and he still has these two pawns here, which can't be thwarted. So at this point, Jan was shaking his head, even though it's relatively obvious, and I think Jan wouldn't have played for this line if he had thought 5 or 10 minutes on each move. But he doesn't do that. He likes to play fast and put pressure on his opponent, and when that works, he looks like a genius. Like, wow, how does Jan play so fast and beat 2800s? But when it doesn't work, people are like, oh, he plays too fast, and what's wrong with him? And, now Ding's the favorite. Everybody always has a psychological, degree after moves are played. And Geary was beside himself. Some people thought it was Howell. So Geary, Howell, and Naroditsky were all just saying white's completely winning here. Because you don't look at the value of the pieces that you learned when you were a beginner, which is now. A rook is 5 and a knight is 3. You look at why the rook is 5 and the knight is 3. And in this position, this knight is worth any rook, and these rooks are terrible. Like these knights are worth good rooks. If my knight was here or here, and your rook was good, that's about equal, because they're both good. But these are horrible rooks. The knight was the best piece for black, even better than the queen. The knight was controlling all kinds of squares, blockading, putting pressure on the c4 pawn, stopping d6, and now the knight's gone. So knight d4, for a player of Jan's level, is quite a bad mistake. And I would say it's the worst move of the match, knight d4. Because he went from worse to, resignable. Like if two engines are playing, white gets 100 out of 100 here. Not two humans, but the better you are at chess, the more white's going to win because white has everything and black has nothing. You're showing me nothing, but you're telling me everything. Now, it turns out Ding's father was the world heavyweight champion of Sicilian liars. He knew the pantomime. Okay, so G5, because black has nothing to do except G5. And then maybe rook G7 and, maybe in some dream world I can attack. Knight takes. Always play knight F5. So queen G6. G4. Geary said white's screaming out to play G4 because he wants to play knight F5. Then black can't move. So black's in stalemate. Thank you, Chess Dojo Live, for rating with 75. That rhymed. Go Chess Dojo Live, but stay there. So Jan very quickly took that, stopping knight F5 for one move. He stopped it for one move. Okay, H5, knight F5, rook H7, queen E4. So white's plan is very straightforward. He's going to play E7, D6, D7. And he's going to just crash through in the center. And if white doesn't do that, that's fine. White will just do nothing. And then black will do nothing. And then white will do it later. G4, I play H4. H4, I play G4. The queen's trapped. Rook's trapped. Pawn on E6 is ridiculously good. And the better you are at chess, the more you like white. So at some point during Hustler Casino Live, I saw Magnus look at his phone and go, God damn. Okay, because he was watching the game and he's better than the players. So he couldn't even believe how good this is. So that sort of proves that money isn't everything because Magnus won $4,000 playing poker and he would have made $1 million playing this match. But he didn't want to play the match. You guys want $1 million. Magnus wants to do what he wants to do, which doesn't involve making $1 million. If he wants to make $1 million, he'll do something else. Okay. So the game didn't last very long. Went about 10 more moves. King H8. Obviously, white is threatening knight E7 check, and queen takes queen. So king H8 stops that because it's not check. Pawn to E7. Here we come. If you take the pawn, white's up a piece in the endgame. D6. If you take, I play knight takes, forking. If you don't take, I play D7. After D7, everyone in the chat likes white. Don't need to explain that to the chat. Okay, so he takes. If you play queen takes, I play knight takes rook. My knight's defended by X-ray, and I'm up a piece. So he decided not to be down a piece. And instead, the material's equal, but a pawn on the 7th is worth quite a bit. Typically, it's worth about a rook. So, because potentially it's a queen any move. And black's king isn't defended very well. Queen E6, threatening queen F6. If you play rook F7 to defend your F pawn, queen takes rook and queen. Nice simple tactic, nice puzzle rush tactic. Rook F1, threatening queen F6 check, can't allow that. Rook H6. Rook D1, threatening rook D8, can't allow that. So he plays F5 attacking the queen. He's hoping for queen takes pawn, but that still wins for white because white has rook D7. So I could take the pawn, but queen E5 check makes more sense. I want to play rook D8. King F7. Now if rook D8, I can play queen takes e7. Queen takes f5. If you play king takes e7, rook e1 check wins the queen. White's finally up material. Rook f6. Queen h7 check. Black played the only legal move and therefore best. King e6. Every move wins. Play queen g7, making it black's move. Black can't play queen takes e7 because rook e1 check. So black has to make a move here. Good luck. Play rook g6. That looks reasonable. Queen f8. And again, if queen takes pawn, rook e1 check. In this position, he resigned. The cutest variation, if you like cute, I'm not saying you like cute. If you like cute, the cutest variation is rook g8, rook d8. God damn. First played in the game, The Truth versus It Hurts. Rook d8's not the only winning move, but it's definitely the coolest. Now, I was thinking queen takes rook was winning because queen takes rook is winning. And then rook d8. That's definitely not as cool as rook d8 right away. That just looks nicer. This also wins. So since rook g8 loses to queen takes and to rook here and to rook e1 check, we'll just win slowly. Then here Jan resigned. Good resignation. So very nice game from Ding, and Jan sort of lost the thread of the game when he played knight f5, knight d4. And for somebody of his level, that knight d4 is a bad mistake. He really underestimated rook takes d4. Then after knight b3, he thought about it for a minute and he choked on his own rage. He was like, what's wrong? And I do that all the time when I play in tournaments. I see my opponent's moves. I'm not worried. They play the moves and I'm like, oh, horrible. Happens all the time. You look at the variations, you conclude, yeah, that's okay. Then it happens and you're like, that's not okay. That's chess. Chess is difficult. And that was a very good game by Ding. He sacrificed a pawn. He got a big center. He actually played faster than Jan most of the game. Yeah, good luck doing that. That was his greatest achievement. So now the match is tied. The next game is Saturday morning, 5 a.m. Eastern. I hope you like the recap. And seriously, based on the way I play poker, I'm really glad you guys gave a lot of subs today. Thank you. You guys did good. These games are very complicated. You could watch 5 different recaps and see 5 different analyses. And obviously, if I was doing a recap for Grandmasters, it would be a lot different than the recap for you guys. This recap is for players from like 0 to 2000. If you're a master or better, you probably want to see Naroditsky and Geary because they give more detail and more variations, which would just confuse you. In fact, even the ones that I gave would probably confuse you. I try to make it so you understand. But for reasons that are unclear to me, but are very common, when somebody loses a chess game, that means something else to you. Oh, psychologically it's over. Now the match is finished. It scores 2-2. People lose chess games. It happens. You're just not used to it because Magnus Fabi was 12 draws. So you're not used to people winning chess games in a world championship. But I mean, Kasparov, after 29 games, was down 5-0. And Karpov never won a 6th game that match. So, you know, sometimes you lose games. By the way, there's a match between Spassky and Korchnoi. It was a candidates match. Korchnoi lost 4 games in a row with no draws. Loss. You understand? And Korchnoi won the match. Seriously. So sometimes in chess you lose. That happens. Sometimes you make a bad move. Now, when you make a bad move against an opponent of equal ability, it doesn't matter as much. because you guys don't have the acumen to finish it off without any chances. If you make a mistake here and the engine says you're losing, it's likely you're done. You can't recover. Your opponent won't let you. So one mistake in any position, any game, could cost you the whole game, which is unusual for lower rated players. They usually make several mistakes. And then one is like, well, I hung my queen with mate, so I couldn't recover when he mated me. Truth hurts. Lots of action. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks, Lucas Capito. I'll be on tonight streaming in probably about 4 hours, something like that. Something.